Hello, mortals, and welcome back. I'm Count Christina.
And I'm Lord Lauren.
And this is the Ghoul Groove Podcast. Ooh. Today, we talk about vampires, a mythical creature that subsists by feeding on the vital essence of the living, generally in the form of blood.
We will uncover the folklore, fashion, and music of the undead.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Welcome back.
We're really excited for this episode.
Yeah, this one's going to be really fun.
Yeah, if you love vampires as much as we do, then you're going to love this one.
For sure.
Yeah, we have so much to dig up.
So we're just going to jump right on in.
Okay, so for this part, I did the research for the folklore. So we're going to be talking about the origins of vampires. And for Lauren, you did most of the music.
The music side of stuff. And then we also are going to talk a lot of fashion and TV shows and different renditions of vampires throughout the years. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the origins of vampires. And Chrissy is going to cover that one.
So the vampire is said to have originated in the early 18th century, Central Europe, particularly Transylvania, or Transylvania, as the vampires would say. So Vlad the Impaler was a big influence on the story of Dracula. His castle, himself, pretty much everything. He was born in Transylvania, Romania, and he grew to rule Wallachia, Romania, on and off between 1448 and 1477. And he got his nickname because his favorite way to kill his enemies was to impale them on a wooden stake. And you know vampires, wooden stakes, everything like that. Now this is just part of the legend, but apparently he used to die next to his dying victims and dip his bread in their blood.
That's crazy.
Yeah, along with other brutal things, which gave him that vampire.
Yeah, for people to think
that
was what that was.
And obviously there's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was made in 1897, the book.
Oh, I was going to say, actually, I did an excerpt from the Dracula ballet, which I was going to I just thought about bringing that up. But yeah, it's inspired so many different things, like plays, ballets.
Yeah, and I did actually see the ballet.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I think that was last year or something, and it did inspire way back when, 1927 even, there was a stage version of Dracula in London and in New York. And according to Dreyer, it was successful because vampires were the fashion at the time.
Yeah, that style.
Yeah.
And
they became, there's so much evolution of vampires.
Yeah.
We can't even talk about all of it today, or it would take hours.
No, so we're kind of, touching on the surface of, the origins of it, and then talking about a lot of, recent-y kind of things, too.
So there are some grave robberies, way back when, I think the 18th century, and people would mistake that as corpses rising from their own graves. They wouldn't think automatically, oh, that's a grave robbery.
Yeah.
They would just think, oh, they rose from the dead. So they started to put cages around those graves, but you see them today sometimes, but they're very old, but they're known as mort safes. And that was the 18th and 19th centuries to prevent grave robberies, but people would say oh, it's to prevent the vampires from getting out. Even they would dig up the graves and put a stake through their heart or burn their bodies.
Just to make sure.
Yeah, just to make sure.
That's crazy.
And it's so weird because nowadays if people would do that, they'd be oh, that's crazy. But back then they really truly believed that. And before even Dracula came out, there was a book called The Vampire by John Polidori in 1819. So that's not even as well known as Dracula.
No, but Dracula became the forefront of
of vampires.
The original story.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a bit of a newer one, but not very new because it still had to do in the 18th century. But this is the New Orleans Casket Girls. It's about some women who traveled to the French colonies with suitcases, and people thought the suitcases resembled caskets, coffins. And they were staying at a convent. Everyone thought that they transported vampires with them through those little caskets. And the mortality rate actually rised when the girls came to town. And no one knew what was in the casket suitcases. They never opened it or said what it was. They actually ended up vanishing. And from what I remember, the legend says that their caskets were left behind and stored in the convent, locked away to keep them safe. The convent is still there.
Yeah.
So people have never actually seen the caskets.
Strange.
But people think that they turned into bats or something, or they went into the caskets and are hiding in there.
Strange.
Yeah, it was actually a real New Orleans legend.
Conspiracy legend. Yeah. Strange.
So, there's a lot of folklore with vampires, especially in New Orleans.
Yeah, for sure. I know we want to go and visit New Orleans at some point.
So much vampire stuff there.
So that's a place maybe in the future we'll,
definitely
go explore. Would be fun. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to current renditions of vampires and the fashion that came with each show and movie.
Really excited about that.
So we're actually going to start with Nosferatu, which has now been made into a current movie remake, which we'll also dive into. But the original came out in 1922, and it was a silent film. It was like a German silent film. And that was like that was the first vampire thing.
And they look so different, like the Nosferatu in the original
versus this now. Yeah, oh, for sure.
I prefer the original.
Me too. I do too, because to me
like,
that
looks
like...
Why did he have a mustache in this new one?
They had to make it current. They had to make the girls love him.
But yeah, the fashion, it pretty much stayed the same because it's...
This time period. Yeah, they filmed... I feel like actually the new film though did a really good job of making it feel like you were in that time period.
The cinematography
was really good. And also I was, we were looking at stuff about Nosferatu, and it was talking about how this was like one of the first times really they like worked with like color filtering.
Yeah.
And while I think this one was a little bit, the original movie was a lot more like kind of like warm, this new remake really focused on like the cool tones of it being very blue, like hued blue and dark.
A lot nowadays.
Yeah. And so it was just interesting to see like that like contrast of everything, but it was definitely very
and
like
the original
Victorian fashion and stuff. So
yeah, they used German expression. We saw that because it does take place in Germany, and it was a silent film.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but that was like the first one that came out, and yeah, we're kind of gonna just like breeze through things, not like get super into detail.
We're not gonna mention every single vampire movie ever,
or every single detail of every movie that we're mentioning, because we would never.
But we are going in order from what we have,
like date wise. So then the next big one was the original Dracula, which came out in 1931, and while that's not actually the most, prominent of the Dracula films. It was that next one to come out. And then I guess if we go next, the next one was, funny enough, The Lost Boys.
1987.
So going 80s.
And that's very Billy Idol style. Obviously, they show their new wave.
Yeah, me loving Billy Idol.
They have that new wave style. Leather jackets. It's very 80s.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is it's like, that was probably one of the first times that, like, vampires had a different fashion sense, and they were more, like, quote-unquote undercover.
They're more, like, cool.
They're cool. They were cooler. Like, they took that 80s style, but it was, like, it was the first time that, like, the vampires didn't have a Victorian look. Like, it was, like, one of those, like, they're undercover kind of, like, vibe, where it was, like, that's why they could blend in with, like, people.
And I heard they're actually making a Lost Boys Broadway show.
Oh, wait, that's going to be so good.
I know.
Wait, we need to see that if it comes out.
They're still going with the vampire plays. Like, it's always being inspired.
Yeah, vampires,
forever.
Like, there'll always be something that you can keep going
I wonder
on.
what they're going to evolution to, like, in the future. Like, what are they going to become?
No, I'm really curious, yeah. So that was the next one. And then if we go into, like, 90s, then I guess the next one was the Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, and that one's more prominent than
that one was
original.
The one with, like, Winona Ryder in it and stuff. So that one really, like...
Still the Victorian style.
Yes, because oding to the original and stuff, but being more with current,
and very similar to Nosferatu, like trying to
emulate,
like, hypnotize the women. Like,
you're talking about that. Like, I was gonna say emulate the Victorian, but and also like hypnotizing the women. Yeah, that's a really good.
It's very much like that. The next one would be Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah, which also, same thing, had that Victorian influence of style and fashion.
And they even made that into a show today.
Yeah, like, I haven't seen the new one, no.
But I know of it.
Yeah.
But I think the Interview with the Vampire, it has Brad Pitt, right?
The old one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I know the new one has Thomas Doherty in it. I haven't seen it, but I know it has him in it, and I wanted to watch that one. But then you go on, and we have The Craft, which is probably the first one to focus on true gothic fashion.
Yeah. And this isn't really vampire per se.
No.
But
it has the fashion style. Yeah, this one's not as much like vampire, but in terms of like a vampire gothic fashion sense, it does.
You could tell it was influenced by that.
I think
a lot of witchy styles were influenced by vampires.
Yes, which is exactly why a lot of like these shows we're kind of getting into, like the fashion sense. I would say The Craft is actually like more like true gothic fashion.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But then you kind of like transition into like examples like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
And which both of us love. And so it's like one of those things like that fashion was like 90s whimsigoth, which is that ode to gothic fashion, but with a whimsical, more like earthy toned, that kind of like just like witch vibe.
And I love how in all of these, all the vampires are so different from each other. Like sometimes they make them romantic, sometimes they make them very evil.
That's a really good point. A lot of the older ones, it's more like romantic.
But they're also kind of like
monstery, romantic monster. And I feel like
Buffy, they're more monster.
They're
but
monster.
Also they have the romantic elements
because of people. Well, because
like
they have like Buffy's. Yes, they have like Buffy's like love interest.
But like also the way they look is so different. It's kind of more like werewolfy looking.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Like because they built. That's exactly like where we're starting to get. When we got into the 2000s, they really made a monster look for them. Not like a human scary look, but like monster. Which is definitely with Buffy, like the crinkles of the skin like, and like everything that they made. Like they made them like get wrinkly and everything.
But they
not just
kept
have
like some of the original stuff, like wooden stakes
that you had to stake them and things like that.
There's different rules in every
and they can't be in the sun.
Yeah.
Example. The rings.
We'll get into that.
Daylight rings. We're going to get into that because that one will transition us into a later one. But there's also Charmed. I know you're a really big Charmed fan because that was right after Buffy.
They focus on different monsters, but there are vampire episodes. And the vampires in that are kind of like more romantic, but they are evil because they try to defeat them. So, I mean, it's just, the style is pretty much the same as Buffy. Whimsy Gothic, 90s.
Yeah.
And they're trying to defeat vampires.
Yeah.
So it's more like, I feel like 90s were more like monster
because it was like real
but
life
with their 90s
monster
style.
Yeah, with the 90s.
Like they didn't do Victorian.
No,
really.
for sure. Well, because like that's a perfect example of like all of these vampires start as like the early, either 90s or 2000s, even 80s, like the Lost Boys. They started to, I guess the word would be like, blend in to the fashion sense, like the fashion sense, yes. Which I think is cool.
Mainly just the rules stayed the same. Holy water, daylight,
wooden
stakes,
everything like
fangs,
that all stayed the same. But it's interesting to see all the different like, like I guess like not makeup. I don't know what you would call it, like practical effects that they chose to do. I think that's like so interesting to see how it's like evolved.
So we do have Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, and this is right after the 90s.
Like this is 2000s on the dot.
But you could see the 90s is still there. It's very similar to Charmed and Buffy. They have like wooden stakes. For some reason they bring up silver in here, but I think that's more werewolves. And this one, it kind of is more Victorian with the vampire.
You know what we haven't talked about yet? The garlic thing, but we'll get there.
They have that in here.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say.
I think on Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, that's a myth.
Yeah, and see, well, same with, isn't it on, same thing, Vampire Diaries?
Yeah, they kind of did this with Wizards of Waverly Place, too.
Yes, like Wizards of Waverly Place, but Vampire Diaries,
stuff.
same thing. So now transitioning out of that.
Yeah, and he sleeps in a coffin, too, on Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. Very Victorian. Yeah, and then we go into Supernatural, which is Y2K, obviously.
So this is, like, starting that era of everything.
And I would say the vampires are very similar to Buffy. Their teeth, instead of having fangs, like just 4 fangs, it's all their teeth are fangs.
Yeah.
And they're more evil on Supernatural.
Definitely, yeah. Because there's the whole, like you said, Supernatural. Like, there's the whole battle of good and evil for the whole thing. So it's like, if, Sam and Dean are good, you gotta make evil look really evil.
Yeah, and there's never really a good vampire.
Yeah. And it's all, like, the same stuff, though, like stakes and...
Yeah, it's mainly just the style. It was early 2000s, so the vampires, kind of like the same with the 90s, fitting in with the low-rise jeans.
Yes.
Leather jackets still, because that's always been it's, like, gothic.
Gothic. You have to have that sense of, like, gothic, cool. I feel like biker kind of became a thing, too.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, like, with 2000s kind of sinking in, which is why that, like, leather kind of, like, that thing kind of sunk in. We're going to actually talk about Twilight before we go into Vampire Diaries, because that came out in 2008.
Yeah, and this, I literally remember seeing this in the movies.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with Twilight. This one is a little bit more different. They sparkle in the sun instead of burning.
Yeah.
It's definitely more romantic.
More romantic for sure.
Than monstery.
And another example, Twilight actually really took to the coloring thing. Like, they took that from that, like, original, like, Nosferatu, like, of being very, like, I mean, everyone thinks Twilight, and there's, like, the Twilight filter.
I feel like they were the first to not do that practical makeup on the face to make them look ugly.
Yeah.
I think that's why they're so popular, because Edward was supposed to be, like,
handsome.
Like a handsome vampire, pale guy. And were they weren't the first to do werewolves versus vampires, right? It was kind of like, because I know that became a big thing, but I don't know if they were the first to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But, like, things like that, that's so interesting. But, like, to me, well, I guess I'm trying to think about flying.
Yeah, because
like,
they're bats.
Yeah, I know. That's, like, something, because I'm, like, in Twilight, I know that he was swinging from the damn trees.
Spider monkey.
Yeah, spider monkey. Like, I'm like, he was swinging from the trees. And then I know, like, let's talk about this. Now, moving into Vampire Diaries, because I want to talk about this, because I, for a while, like, would laugh at Vampire Diaries, because I always watched my sister watch, like, the first episode. And when Stefan's flying off of the, like...
Oh, watch the first episode, so cheesy.
No, because why did Stefan fly? And, like, Stefan's the only one who flies in any of this show.
They definitely took that out after the first episode.
No, but they put the one scene of him saving Catherine.
And also going up the
tower.
The carnival.
Oh, in the carnival with Elena.
Yeah,
yes.
he, like, flew up. I was like, they brought it back.
No, I know, like, a couple times, but it was only ever Stefan.
And also with Damon
with
they had the fog.
The fog and the crow.
Yeah, they never did the fog anymore.
Nope.
After... First couple of episodes they did, and then the crow, they took it away.
Yeah,
also.
after, like, the first episode.
Yeah, maybe they thought it was too cheesy.
Yeah.
But I started watching Vampire Diaries when I was, like, 13, I think. Mm-hmm. And that was, like, kind of my first introduction. Well, besides Twilight.
Yeah.
I watched Twilight, Lost Boys, and Vampire Diaries. But Vampire Diaries was my favorite.
Yeah, Vampire Diaries
out of all
is
of
so
them. Good. Like, I just love how they incorporate the daylight rings.
The daylight rings was really cool because
instead of burning.
Yes, instead of burning. But it also, like, it was interesting because it really brought forth the... like, ability to carry on a show really without them only being in, like, the dark of night, too. Just, like, really having, like...
And they add so many rules in here. I think garlic was a myth on there,
Garlic was a myth, and that was why I was going to bring it
Wooden
up.
Wooden stakes, obviously, are a big thing.
Yes, wooden stakes are a big thing, obviously, with, like, the originals.
Yeah, and I love how they die on Vampire Diaries. Like, they turn into, like veiny.
Yes, yeah.
I just love everything about that
I
show.
think that was, like, one where, for the first time, like, they really went into, like, the practical effects of how stuff was.
Yeah.
But I really do love...
CGI, obviously.
Yeah, CGI stuff like that.
It was really good.
Yeah.
And I love how they bring up New Orleans as the originals.
Talking about, like...
They keep it historically accurate.
Yep, yeah.
It's so good.
No, I
agree.
Guys,
watch Vampire Diaries if you haven't.
No, so good. My Babysitter's a Vampire. Yeah, that's, like, the last one that we didn't bring up.
That's such a big part of our childhood.
No,
because actually this was before I even started watching Vampire Diaries, obviously.
Yeah, and I feel like because that was Disney.
When I was, like, 11.
Because that was on, like, Disney Channel.
Yeah,
so it was, like...
I love that movie / show.
Yeah.
So good. Theme song, amazing.
Oh my god, love.
And the style, very 2011. Mm-hmm. They bring up, like, I feel like they make their own rules in that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But they do have the wooden stakes. She can't see her reflection in the mirror.
Yeah.
They could do that.
That's another, yeah.
In Vampire Diaries. They do, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, on there, they don't. So it's like...
Yeah, it's so interesting, like, how certain shows, like, they choose, they're like, we're not going to deal with that. And honestly, it could be partially due to, like, not wanting to deal with those effects and things of, like, that's,
isn't
like,
garlic a thing on there? I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
It's been a long time since I watched it.
And you always have to invite a vampire in.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that. Same
thing on Vampire Diaries.
Vampire Diaries.
And My Babysitter's a Vampire.
Yeah. That's another one. Yeah, you have to be invited in.
Yeah, but for some reason they wear sunglasses on My Babysitter's a Vampire, and they could still be in the sun.
They could be in the sun, but they were, like, sun sensitive.
Yeah.
Like... I do remember
without
that.
their sunglasses, they were, like...
dying. They were dying. They were just, like, running with their eyes.
Such a good movie and show.
But, yeah. I think that's where we're going to stop on, like, the movies and shows. And, like, I think that was really cool because we didn't even plan on it, but we talked about all the different nuances in every single, like, show. And we didn't even talk about, like, doing that. So I love that we did that.
I actually forgot to mention one, which is True Blood. And that came out in 2008. And I just have to mention this one because it's Southern Gothic. And that's one show that they really focus on that. You never see a vampire show that
that's more like Southern.
And they really go down to the roots of New Orleans vampires, which is the lore for True Blood. Original. And it's a very summer-like show. The vampires are very romantic in that one. Mm-hmm. And also there's some evil ones. But Anne Rice actually said that she liked True Blood, and she made Interview with a Vampire.
Oh, very
So that
cool.
says a lot about it.
Yeah.
And she's from New Orleans, I think. Like, I believe she's from New Orleans.
So she knows all the lore.
Yeah, and True Blood's very good.
Okay, so now we're switching gears into music, which I'm really excited about. And I did actually a ton of research, and I'm pretty sure I have more on, like, another page, too. So we'll talk about that.
So much.
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot of different, like, subgenres to gothic and, like, vampire music, like, that kind of thing. Because there's, like, I'll name a few. So there's, like, what I would subcategorize this one as all together is, like, gothic rock, post-punk, dark wave is all its own kind of thing. There's gothic alternative post-punk, which I think is taking that more, like, alternative, a little bit more mellow, like, just different vibe of that. Then there's, like, industrial gothic music, which I will get into that because that one's kind of like a specific band that kind of, like, really, like, shaped that. And then there's obviously, if you're going, like, vampire, like, organ harpsichord music, Baroque style, like, yeah, like, we're gonna go all into that. And then lastly, like, new wave rock. And that one is a little, I say it's a reach, it's not at all, which is really funny because a lot of gothic music style came from new wave. And fashion came from new wave. So that's, like, a really cool...
I think the vampire music definitely started in the 80s. Like, you never hear 70s, like, gothic, really?
Not gothic. A funny and, like, good example is, like, The Doors.
Yes.
The Doors used a lot
Riders on the Storm.
Yes. Like, perfect example of that. Like, Light My Fire, the... Da-na-na-na-na, like, at the beginning, like, the very intro. I might crop out my voice, but, like, the beginning of Light My Fire or, like, Whiskey Bar by The Doors, like, all of those, like, perfect examples of a band that uses, like, harpsichord. And it's like, those are 70s, but it was very rarely used. And that's why The Doors have such a unique sound. And, like, no one really, like, fully emulated it, is because it was using instruments that no one was really using back then.
Definitely.
But yeah, so I'm going to go through some bands and ones that I feel like cover, you know.
Yeah, and we pretty much listen to the exact same ones.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
so
this is our music.
Fully talk about that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with that, like, organ, harpsichord, Baroque style. So a perfect example of that, like, beginning one would be, like, Johann Sebastian Bach's Toccata Fugue in D minor. That is, like, one of the most popular. Like, everyone's heard it, even if you don't know what it is.
That, like, framed the vampire. Like, I feel like,
for sure.
Like, without the music, I feel like it would be so, like, empty.
Yeah. No, and I think that's one that, like, it's just everyone, that's, like, a... Like,
when you think vampire, you think of that.
Vampire, yeah, you think of, like, the organ.
Yeah,
you think of an
even
organ.
In shows now, I feel like they kind of make fun of that, like... If it's a funny show,
yeah,
they'll bring up a vampire and then they'll play
that. Like, it's, like, one that's, like, really been influential in that. Another one that's more recent is Andrew Lloyd Webber's Overture from The Phantom of the Opera.
Yes.
Which everyone, same thing. Everyone knows it, even if you haven't seen it. You know, that kind of thing, that it's so, like, prominent in...
It's so popular.
And popular for being, like, organ music. So it's so cool. And then this one's actually way more recent, and that would be Danny Elfman's Wednesday theme, which is harpsichord. So it's not organ, straight up organ, but it's like organ and strings. It gives the vibe.
You automatically just think of that gothic vampire. You think of
very gothic vampire, which is kind of that whole Wednesday, like the whole Addams Family vibe is that gothic.
We love Danny Elfman here.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about instruments. Because back in the day, obviously, we give examples of, like, songs that use harpsichords and organs and things like that for those classical styles of it. But in more modern takes on, like, gothic music and stuff, the synth is, like, any kind of, you know, modern keyboards. Those are the really, like, popular sounds, along with, in the rock realm of it all, distorted guitars. And actually, I have it written in here, but we'll talk more in depth on a specific artist that I think really hammered in on the distorted guitars. But yeah, so let's get talking about, let me start with, so let's start with, like, gothic alternative post-punk. And the reason I want to start here is because of, like, Susie and the Banshees.
Oh, yes.
Which, Spellbound. No, such a good song. But, like, that is, like, one of the, like, if anybody thinks, like, gothic music, like goth music, that is one song that everyone thinks of.
I actually did a Southern Gothic outfit video last summer to Spellbound.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like that's, like, super prominent. If like anyone's like, oh, do you know like any gothic music? That's a song that like they would expect you to be like, oh, I know that song, you know? And another one is The Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen.
I love that song.
But those are two that I feel like are very much that gothic alternative, where it's like not like so heavy on dark, but like the alternative scene. I think that one's really prominent. And so kind of dipping into that, I feel like the Smiths and The Cure are also there, where they're not so heavy and dark, but they have like the fan bases are super like,
and the Smiths, they have that song The Cemetery
Gates,
and The Cure, they have that very dark synth kind of, or like what's that song,
A Forest. That's a good example of one.
That is.
A Forest is a great song. And that one's that's The Cure. Did you say the Smiths?
No, The Cure.
Yeah,
I said The Cure. I can't think of it right now.
But yeah, there's so many different songs by all of them. But like that's the funny thing is I feel like The Cure more than the Smiths, especially for like the look. Mm-hmm. The Cure had such like Robert Smith's look was so very gothic, heavily based. Like that's like a big, fashion influence for the gothic, look and scene. But I don't think, especially the Smiths, I wouldn't say, and they don't necessarily classify themselves, even The Cure necessarily, they both don't classify themselves as goth. Like I was looking up a lot of information about it, and they don't classify as it, but they were so influential to the scene of everything and the like just music world of gothic music at the time. Okay, so next we're going to jump into a little bit of a mix. I know I talked about like industrial gothic music, and I'm going to mix that one as well with new wave and rock right now, because a perfect example of a band that started very new wave rock and then very transitioned to that like industrial, I wouldn't say post-punk, but industrial gothic kind of sound was Depeche Mode.
Yes.
Obviously, I always talk about how they're like my favorite band ever, but they were so influential.
They're very like dark.
And that's the thing is they started, I mean, you think about like Just Can't Get Enough, and it starts so bubblegum pop kind of sounding, and that's why they were very considered like new wave when they started out. And I think that then they kind of transitioned into that dark wave industrial by the time they hit about, I would say, I mean, I'm trying to think. Violator was like their big album, but that whole sound they had was so different than their earlier songs.
And I love all their stuff. It's so good.
Oh, everything. And the thing is, even to now, they've kept their darker sound down to like, what is it, their Memento Mori album that they have currently. There's one that they have called Ghosts Again, and I love that song. But it's still true to the current, like the main prominent sound of Depeche Mode. That's like the dark, gothic,
it's very echoey.
The thing with Depeche Mode is I feel like they focus a lot on like the emotion of things. The gothic scene is very like people with feel, like in their feels, like they're very emotional people in tune with their emotions. And so like a lot of these bands, some of them, as you get into more like current now, focus on the music itself and a lot less the like emotion of it. But Depeche Mode was one of those bands, which is why they're so big, and like their lyrics have like a heavy meaning, and that's kind of the same thing with I think like the Smiths and like The Cure. Like they can have these tracks that are so like whatever, but it's like at the same time they have the heavy lyrics and that gothic sound to them, so I guess now moving on to talking specifically more like new wave rock examples. B-52's Rock Lobster.
Love B-52s. They were one of my favorite bands for a very long time. I did so many deep dives into them.
I love them.
They're very quirky.
Yes. Oh, I've seen them live before, and it was actually funny enough. I actually saw the B-52s, and then they performed Rock Lobster, and then right after I saw Panic at the Disco, and then they performed Don't Threaten Me with a Good Time. So like 2 weekends back to back. I was like, that was kind of crazy.
And everyone always uses Rock Lobster in their goth videos. It's like just known as a goth song.
Well, even though it's not goth, but goths love that song.
Yes.
Because let's talk about a big part of this. The gothic music scene was all about dancing. I mean, you think about like, they have all like the what do they call it? Like, there's a certain like style of dancing, but like the gothic style of dancing. Like that's why like I have a playlist and it's called like Goth Dance Club. Like that's the thing is they were dance clubs. Like because especially all of this like gothic scene was really popular in the 80s. And so because of that, dance was a huge thing, and everybody was finding music to dance to. And Rock Lobster had a great beat. You just want to dance. Like, that's the whole thing. And it's the weird vocals that kind of, like, really draw you into, which is a big part of, like, not being afraid to be kind of weird and quirky is another really big part of, like...
Yeah, because their band is not goth at all, really.
No,
like,
not at all.
You never hear Love Shack or Rome in a goth club or something.
But you would hear
Rock
Lobster because it just had such, like, a good bass, kind of, like, riff kind of thing going on. And then a good example, Blue Monday by New Order.
That's such a big one.
And that's so new wave, but everybody loves it, and it's kind of carried over, and it's influenced a lot of. That's the thing, is a lot of, I would say, strictly new wave, it kind of merges into what became those super gothic kind of considered bands. And I think it really influenced. Another one is like Bronski Beats, Small Town Boy has been so popular on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff. And I think it's really cool to see that one making a prominence because it's kind of, it's like I said, very new wave.
I even used that song for a Slasher Summer video.
Yeah, so it's really cool, but it has that dance vibe. That's the big part about new wave carrying over into gothic stuff, was that you can dance to the music.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Okay, so moving on, we're going to now cover new band. I'm going to talk about Lebanon Hanover because Gallo Dance.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that one.
So I mentioned earlier the distorted guitars. Think about like the literal riff, the bum 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 bum, distorted guitar. Perfect example of how now, especially in the rock like gothic music scene, that is what heavily carries everything. That bass guitar, the distorted guitars to give like that sound was so prominent in everything. Same with She Wants Revenge. Perfect example of another band that
they have
really...
so many good ones, too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. She Wants Revenge. I just love, like, these things.
Tear You Apart.
Tear You Apart.
There's one, Sister.
Sister's so good, too. There's Out of Control. What a great song. But, like, that's another one that I would consider the newer sound is that post-punk, dark wave, gothic rock sound, where it's a lot more, like, heavy on dark. That's what... now is really carrying that sound is the darker sound and less dance pop. That was really the first original driving sound of new wave gothic rock. But yeah, no, another one would be Boy Harsher. And I know I was talking to you and showing you some songs. I think you had heard the song LA. But there's another one called, I wish I typed it in here, Pain. But yeah, no, there's another one called Pain, and it's heavily influenced by like 80s dark wave sound. And so there's just so many like newer artists too, which I really appreciate that it's not stopped. You know, that sound like evolving. I love that it's continued.
I see you have Radio Werewolf there.
Oh my God.
I didn't even see that you had that. I had it pulled up because I was going to talk about it. But I used it for a Summer Ween video.
Yes.
I love that
Buried
song
Alive
so much.
is so good.
I've been buried alive.
I love Buried Alive. It's so cool, like just the concept, because to me, that one's cool because that actually has harpsichord.
Yeah.
And organ. And it's like...
and it's very like an underrated band. Like I even looked him up one time, and there's not really many songs.
No.
It's only just like that one that's a very popular one. And I was like, why can't they make more music? It's
I know.
So good.
But that song is like I see that all the time on TikTok for like gothics, like the gothic like posts and stuff. Like I think it's so cool. But yeah, no, that's one song that I'm like, I feel like is an ode to original gothic vampire specifically. Yes. Like or
even
werewolf,
the album
you know,
cover,
like that vibe.
It's very
gothic vampire for sure. And then you have Twin Tribes, which is another newer band, and they have a song called Monolith and Another Life, and I would say that's very much like new goth music, which is really cool, and I think it's fun to like hear the evolution. One other one that I would say is definitely gothic rock is typo negative.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I Don't Want to Be Me, and what's the other one? Like Black Magic #1 by them also as well. But they're definitely more rock.
I do want to talk about Ghost.
Oh, I you know what? So funny. You, I think, played them earlier, or you were playing something, and it made me think about that because we need to bring up Ghost.
They're very much
gothic rock.
Yes, and they sound very 80s rock, and I love that about them because you never hear new bands that sound 80s rock.
No,
like you listen to Spillways, the
love that song. Yep.
and
that's all
obviously Mariana Cross is their biggest song, but that's their most. I feel it sounds very vampire, and I'm a Marionette.
You showed me that song, and I love that song.
It's very vampire-esque, gothic, and I just like how they're not so dark. They're very rock and kind of sometimes like upbeat.
I guess I struggle with the fact that so many people in the gothic like scene are like, you don't look goth, you don't do this and that, and it's like goth started out as a music thing.
Yeah, and dance. Like you're not like sometimes you see goth people like that look goth
and like trad goth makeup
listening
and things
to like not goth music.
Yeah,
and that's
totally fine.
It's fine.
And there you also see normal looking people like us listening to gothic music.
Well, like not normal, but like
you see more like different fashion senses. Not normal. That's probably the wrong words. You see more people with like a normal fashion sense and stuff, and they listen to that still, and that doesn't make them not goth because goth started out as a music.
It's all about like what you
culture.
Listen to really, and
and it's like I mean, I also think like yes, like we've talked about how fashion influenced, but fashion isn't the only thing carrying, which is exactly why it evolved. Like everything evolved from there.
So we're gonna get into our favorites now.
Just to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, a show I've been watching a lot lately is Cobra Kai. Now, I grew up watching Karate Kid.
Me too.
And I just recently got into Cobra Kai. I've always wanted to get into it, and I started it, and I immediately loved it.
No, it's so good.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I've been binging it.
I don't know if this is like the 4th or 5th season or whatever.
I think they're on their 6th right now.
Okay, because I think I've watched up through season 5. Because I've been caught
3.
up, but I haven't watched the new one, and it's their final season.
And I love how they show Johnny's side of everything. I'm like, this is great.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
No, I just love the show. I'm so a big Johnny Lawrence girl. You know, it's me and the blonde boys. It's me and me and the blonde boys against the world.
And it makes me want to do karate, you guys.
No, literally.
I'm like, let me take some self-defense classes.
No, I know. Like Peyton List, such a badass for that.
I love her.
She's so cool.
School Spirit's so good. Oh
I've watched some of that. I actually was watching it with a friend, but I need to watch from the beginning because I love that.
Yeah.
No, I talked about it, I think, in like our last episode, but I've been talking about wanting to pick up Supernatural again, and I finally did. I think I'm on like season 5, like I'm somewhere at the like middle end. I know, and so it's getting good, and it's not that it wasn't ever good. It's like one of those ones that's like long, like it's like very long. 15 seasons.
It's like it has a lot to do with the fandom. Like they're very close with their fans, and you could tell that throughout the show because they take some of their ideas
and
they make it into an episode.
And that's so cool. But like I have been picking up watching that again, so I think we'll talk about our songs next.
I've been listening to a lot of Dijo. Basic Being Basic.
So good.
Basic Being Basic. I love that part. He reminds me so much of Jack Stauber.
Oh my god,
that very quirkiness.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, that's so true. I didn't think about that. Like
I was listening to that song and I was like, why does this sound like Jack Stauber?
Yeah, that's such a good point. No, I've been listening to a lot of Nessa Barrett, her whole Aftercare Deluxe album. I loved the actual album itself too, so much. But she released the deluxe version, and I'm like in love with the tracks American Beauty and Blue Valentine. They're both very different because American Beauty is a lot more like hard-hitting beat kind of thing and like bad bitch kind of vibes. And then Blue Valentine's more like a ballad. But for 2 different reasons. Like I love both of those a lot. So that's what I've been listening to.
And for our favorite things, I've been wearing a lot of low-rise jeans. I think it's just because early 2000s shows always influenced me, and that's like the majority of the shows I watch. The OC, One Tree Hill, Supernatural, True Blood. It's always low-rise jeans, and I'm like, I want some of my own. So now I have like 5 pairs that I ordered on Depop.
Hey, there you go.
I know. That's so
obsessed. So you're obsessed with Depop too, is what I'm hearing. That you're ordering a bunch of stuff from Depop.
It's like just online thrifting, you guys. Except it can be more expensive, but it's
sometimes it can be more. But sometimes you find things that you wouldn't be able to find.
I usually find like the ones that are not, and I'm like, this is a good deal.
Yeah, exactly. Like you try to find the good deals on it. Now my like favorite thing at the moment is my Hatch alarm clock. So that thing's my favorite thing in the whole wide world because I have blackout curtains in my room where I'm living now. And I have been finding it so hard to get up. And so for Christmas, I asked for that alarm clock. And I just love it to death.
You told me about it, and I want one of my own. There's one where a guy says, I hate Monday. Or no, he said, I hate the weekend.
I hate the weekend. It was like, thank God it's Monday. I hate the weekends. But it's like there's so many different things you can choose to wake up from. But it's like it lights up my room, and I like really appreciate that. If I've mentioned it before, I'm sorry, and I will find a new one for the next
You're
episode.
like, I love it, though.
I love this thing, though, and I will rave about it. It is expensive, but it was like my big Christmas
it's like
present.
Worth it.
It was so worth it, and highly recommend if you have blackout curtains and struggle to get up in the mornings. But anyways, yeah, we hope you guys really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, this was a fun one.
This was actually really, really fun to record and
everything.
I love
the intro.
The intro, you guys, we are obsessed. Also, if you are interested, we filmed a TikTok.
Yeah, go check out. It should be up by the time this comes out.
With the intro, it's actually laughable. Like it's funny. Like we just were like having a good time.
It was so last minute too. We were like, pull out the Halloween costumes.
Yeah, we were like, we have an idea. So yeah, but hopefully we're kind of like wanting to start this new thing of like having cool, interesting intros, like to
this one
captivate
really
you guys.
made our creative juices start to flow.
I know, and we were like, maybe we should start doing this more often. But yeah, so we hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we hope that, you know, you guys will keep tuning back in and give us feedback. Please comment.
Have a spooky day.
Yes, have a spooky day for sure.
And be careful with the vampires.
Watch out, they might come and bite you.